Thank you so much for your willingness and your generosity to contribute to 10 really great projects today. I am Tim Lapira. I am a professor of political science here at James Madison University, and I am the director of the American Political Reform and Innovation Lab. Today I'll be talking about one of our projects. I am in my 12th year here at JMU, and I teach courses on lobbyists and on Congress. Probably two of the topics that people hate most, right? So, in fact, in a recent poll, Congress ended up being lower than cockroaches and other diseases. So, I mean, it's a bit weird that I study this stuff, and it's even a bit weirder that I genuinely like the topics I cover, including Congress, because of its potential. This potential and my intrinsic love for Congress started when I was very young. This is my first view. Right here, you're looking at a view of the Capitol Dome from Union Station in Washington, D.C. This was my first view of the Capitol Dome ever. I was about 15 years old, and I got selected for a week-long program when I was in high school to attend essentially a leadership camp. And as part of that, I was able to raise some funds to take the train down from Philadelphia, where I lived. And here I came out, and I saw that Capitol Dome, and I have to tell you, my heart dropped into my stomach. I still, to this day, 30 years later, every time I visit the Capitol, every time I walk up on Capitol Hill, I have that same feeling. Here is another view of the United States Capitol. I did not come here today to litigate the causes and consequences of January 6th, but I did want to remind all of us, and for all of us to recall, how important of a symbol Congress actually is for our common purpose, right? That it is the place, and just so happens to be the most professional, the most sophisticated legislature in the world. And it is the place where we, together, through our representatives, make sure that our democracy works. As Churchill famously said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. Right? And this is something that continues to motivate me. And what I hope to get you to think about today is that we can be better than this, and that I all hope that we will be. I'm inspired in large part by the namesake of our university, James Madison himself. The image that you're looking at here is the image from his own home, in his library on the second floor of Montpelier. It is at this desk that he sat, where he imagined, and he indeed became, an institutional political innovator himself, where he imagined a constitution that was better for all of us. At the time, of course, the system wasn't working. So instead of sitting back solely in the library and complaining about it, he developed some ideas here and went out into the real world to make those something very genuine, tangible, and realistic, that which we call our Constitution today, and perhaps even more importantly, the other founding documents, the most famous ones of Federalist 10 and Federalist 51. Most notably, James Madison motivates me to get out of my office in Miller Hall here on campus every once in a while, to go out there into the real world to see, to the degree by which I can bring my expertise to bear on real world problems, just like James Madison did. And one of the other underlying themes we learned from James Madison is that rules matter. For those in the room and those in the Zoom room who pay attention to Major League Baseball, you know the upcoming season is going to be really different. There's a lot of rules changes. And not unlike, in the same way, politics has to follow rules. Those rules are not neutral. And those rules sometimes need to change, and change for the better. I've tried to do this in my career, where I've kept one foot in academia and one foot out there in the real world. I am an active member of the nonpartisan good government advocacy community in Washington, just as I am an active member of the faculty here at James Madison, where I teach students. One example is about 4 years ago, I was given leave from teaching responsibilities for a semester, where I went back to work in Congress for the second time in my life for this is a mouthful, the House Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress. Because it is a mouthful, we all called it the Fix Congress Committee. I was there to share my expertise of both of my books and other work that revealed that members of Congress have really reduced the amount of resources they've allocated to their own staff, and which really undermines their own work efforts in recent decades. That resulted ultimately, both internally, the research I did, and externally after I left the committee and came back to JMU. And last year, staff in the House of Representatives got a 21% pay increase for the first time in 12 years. This made me think, well, if I've been able to have an impact with my research on the real world and in ways that actually impact genuine public servants, what other ways might I be able to do this? So with the generosity of the Provost's Office and the Dean of Arts and Letters, this year I founded APRA Lab, the American Political Reform and Innovation Lab. And what I hope to do is to have an impact on a variety of issues that might undermine, question, or threaten our democracy in productive and constructive ways. And also to do that by bringing students along with me. The lab operates under three key principles. First and foremost, we are a nonpartisan lab. I do not belong to either political party. I am not running for office. I'm not trying to help anybody run for office. And I'll leave that up to others to do. But what I believe that we can do, just as I did when I worked at the Fix Congress Committee, is bring sound, evidence-based research to bear on critical problems of democracy and our democratic institutions. And I want to do that in ways to demonstrate to students here at JMU that we can have civil conversations about politics that don't end up with in a cat and dog fight situation. Secondly, as an R2 national research institution now, we are primarily and significantly oriented towards having research impact. I want this lab to have impact on the real world, in the good government community, and for the policymakers who have to make decisions themselves about how we might go about improving our democratic institutions. And most importantly to me, and near and dear to my heart, is that the lab is about undergraduate research experiences. In my career, have always recruited students to mentor and to work with me in order to assist my research. And here in this lab, I've been able to do that, and critically, to pay them, right, in order to help them advance in their undergraduate career themselves. The 21st Century Federalist Papers Project, I'm planning for next year and the next 2 years, will cover a number of topics. These 5 here are merely examples of issues that we may tackle. In the fall, I will convene a group of academics and good government advocates to come up with a list of 4 to 6 issues that we might be able to tackle and be able to share evidence-based research with the community and with policymakers in order to have some sort of impact. These, to me, at least right now, these are really for discussion and open for possibility, but they seem to be critical things in our democracy that we might be able to contribute to the dialogue to improve how American politics works. The idea here is that I will, as the director of the lab and working with students, that I will take each of these issues and rely on both my professional network in political science nationally and in my professional network in the Washington good government community. Here are some examples of national organizations that I have good working relationships with and have at least had some tacit agreement of people who may want to be involved, to bring people together to produce reports that are bring the research out of the peer-reviewed, usually unreadable academic journals and make them digestible for the people who matter, those in Congress and state houses around the country. In order to do that, what I want to do is hire 5 undergraduate research assistants in the lab next year. Each one of those students will be primarily responsible for one of our 5 issues. They will work closely with the academic experts that I will work with, both from our own faculty and perhaps from my professional network nationally, in order to produce what we generally call in Washington a white paper report. These white paper reports will essentially summarize the state-of-the-art social scientific literature that might bring to bear on potential political reforms, whether it be campaign finance or gerrymandering or Supreme Court depoliticization. And each one of these students will work with the author of this report, but critically, we will be relying on the students' creativity. I do not know how to do social media very well, but I'll tell you what, our undergraduate students certainly do. So what I want them to be able to do is develop for each one of these projects a public-facing campaign through websites, social media, other means, to be able to draw attention to each one of these reports that academics will be producing, and to give them critical experience to be able to translate the jargon of an academic discipline into real-world language that people can understand and make use out of, and then be able to show potential employers that they have a final product, that they can demonstrate a portfolio of something that they did outside the typical classroom in order to benefit the real world. My calculation is in each given semester, students work roughly 5 to 10 hours per week. For roughly 15-hour weeks, I give them off during midterms and finals. You know, don't push them too hard. Their work comes first for sure. The grand total, what I'll be asking for you to very generously invest today will be $18,750 to cover 5 students for a full academic year of work in the lab. I'm really excited about this lab and about this project. I hope you can tell. I'm really, really excited about working with these students who absolutely love diving in on something real and something tangible that's not just in a textbook, and they don't just have to memorize for an exam. So I would love to hear your thoughts and answer any questions. Yes?
So I know the last sentence in the proposal just says that resources for professional services will only be sought out if 5 students are fully funded. What does that mean?
Yeah, so my expectation is that the students are not professional or advanced enough and expert enough in design. So when we're, say, putting together these white paper reports and then a social media campaign, much like a marketing and communications plan, where the color scheme, the fonts, the design will be common among all of them in order to be consistent with the brand. Students are very good with this, but I don't know that I'll be able to, what I would like to do is use other funding, but in order to actually get a professional, because it's not my expertise either. And I think it will have a lot more impact if it's branded well, and consistent, of course, with JMU's branding guidelines. But I won't touch that unless, my priority is funding students.
So if there was only funding for 4 students, are you saying you wouldn't move forward? That's where I'm
No, I wouldn't. It's not that I wouldn't move forward, it's that I would not seek out professional design expertise.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yes.
Why is this not a class?
That's right. I actually do teach a senior seminar called Evidence-Based Political Reform. For seniors, right? So these are graduating seniors, all political science majors. This is our capstone course. And what I actually get them to do in that class is work in small groups to produce similar reports of what I'm speaking of here, but at the undergraduate level, they are not, my expectation is not that they're producing something that I might put in front of a senator, right? But so I do teach a class along these similar lines.
But this you put in front of the senator.
Absolutely. That's the idea. And did I see? Yes, sir.
How do you personally define nonpartisan, the word nonpartisan?
Well, not advocating for the election or defeat of a candidate, or not recruiting resources for either party. This often will play out in how we frame our recommendations, in such that there is more than one way to so-called fix campaign finance, let's say, right? There are some ways that are effectively owned by one party versus the other, right? And what I would be sure to do in any of these reports would be to, the idea is to connect what does the political science and social science research say about either or both of these, or in between. And without having any sort of preconceived notion to support or oppose either side, right? Much like in science in a lab, if you might be a physicist or a biologist, you don't start with the conclusion, right? Like a lawyer might, right? Making a court case. You start with a question and a hypothesis, and it might turn out that you're wrong, right? Here I would take a very similar approach and say, well, here might be, say, 5 potential recommendations to fix campaign finance, and let's take a look at what the latest, greatest social science research has to say, without fear or favor to any of them. Yes?
So this is kind of a circle. How would you ensure the diversity of the recruitment of the students? And in that, what would be the application and selection process and then evaluation of the students?
Okay, this is a great question. In fact, one of my motivating factors to pay students in this sense was because in my department in recent years, we really have been trying to think through ways in which we can improve our own recruiting a diverse background of students in our majors, in all of our programming. And one of the things that we've come across is unpaid internships. In political science in particular, we have this that might advantage those who have the resources to, say, travel to Washington or London, what have you. And I thought in my career here, what I've often done is recruit students without paying them. And it struck me to my core that exactly what motivated me was I can't advocate for paid internships if I'm not also recruiting and mentoring students who are doing work with me and on my behalf without also paying them. So to that end, they are institutional employees here at James Madison University, so I follow all the appropriate hiring and recruitment procedures. And I try, as best practices would have, try to recruit a diverse background of students. Right now, of the 5 students, 6 students, including my graduate student. We have several women of color in the lab, so that's something very important to me. As far as evaluation, we hire semester by semester, and we meet on a weekly basis to really check up on progress and on any problems that might be popping up if students have shared issues with some of the projects that we're working on. So it's much like a class. I'm meeting with them regularly, and I've learned over the years as a professor how to deliver maybe unsettling or bad news well and constructively. So that's ultimately my plan about how to do that, to recruit and retain a diverse set of students. And I could also say for sure that I'm very cognizant that one of our protected classes here at James Madison University is partisan affiliation. And following on my very nonpartisan principle, I do not recruit at all based on political ideology or party identity in any way. Not only because it's a rule, but because that's my strong preference.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question. All right. Well, then, thank you.